The atmosphere on the set of The Kelly Clarkson Show was electric as Randy Rainbow, the beloved comedian and satirist known for his sharp-witted musical parodies, took the stage to promote his latest project. Fans in the audience and viewers at home were buzzing with anticipation, expecting the usual blend of humor, charm, and perhaps a spontaneous musical moment that both Rainbow and Clarkson are famous for. The episode began with Kelly Clarkson's signature warmth, her infectious laugh filling the studio as she introduced Randy, praising his knack for blending political satire with Broadway flair. The two shared a playful banter, with Clarkson teasing Rainbow about his viral YouTube videos and his knack for turning political chaos into catchy show-tunes. The conversation flowed smoothly at first, touching on Rainbow's career journey, from his early days in New York to becoming a cultural touchstone during turbulent political times. Clarkson, ever the fan, asked about his creative process, and Rainbow responded with his trademark wit, joking about how he finds inspiration in the endless absurdity of modern politics. The audience laughed, clapped, and cheered, fully engaged in the light-hearted exchange. However, beneath the surface, there was a subtle tension of perhaps a difference in energy or perspective that hinted at the storm brewing. Clarkson, known for her down-to-earth authenticity, pushed Rainbow to dive deeper into the personal side of his work, asking how he balances satire with sensitivity in today's polarized climate. Rainbow, while typically quick with the quip, seemed to pause, his expression shifting slightly as he considered his response. The question was innocent enough, but it struck a nerve, as Rainbow's work often treads a fine line between humor and critique, especially in an era where every word can be scrutinized. The audience didn't notice it yet, but those watching closely could sense a shift in the dynamic, as if the conversation was teetering on the edge of something unexpected. Clarkson, perhaps unaware of the weight of her question, pressed it further, asking Rainbow about the responsibility of being a public figure with the platform. Rainbow's response was measured but pointed, emphasizing that his goal is to entertain, not to preach, and that humor is his way of coping with the world's chaos. The exchange, while still polite, began to feel like a verbal chess match, with each trying to steer the conversation in their own direction. The audience, still laughing and applauding, remained oblivious to the undercurrent, but the stage was set for a moment that would soon make headlines. As the segment progressed, Clarkson pivoted to a more serious topic, referencing a recent controversy surrounding one of Rainbow's parodies that had sparked debate online. She asked how he handles backlash from those who find his work too provocative or divisive. Rainbow, visibly caught off guard, responded with a mix of humor and defensiveness, noting that satire is meant to provoke and that not everyone will be pleased. The room grew quieter, the audience sensing the shift from playful to pointed. Clarkson, perhaps trying to keep things light, made a comment about the challenges of staying true to one's art in a world quick to judge, but her tone suggested a subtle challenge to Rainbow's approach. This moment, though brief, marked the turning point, as Rainbow's usual sparkle dimmed, replaced by a flicker of frustration. The conversation, once a friendly exchange, now felt like a tug-of-war between two strong personalities, each with their own perspective on art, responsibility, and public perception. As the interview continued, the tension between Kelly Clarkson and Randy Rainbow became more palpable, though the audience was still caught up in the excitement of seeing two beloved figures share the stage. Clarkson, known for her ability to connect with guests on a personal level, leaned into a line of questioning that seemed to push Rainbow out of his comfort zone. She brought up a specific parody video that had gone viral but had also drawn criticism from certain groups for its sharp-edged humor. Clarkson, with her characteristic candor, asked Rainbow how he decides where to draw the line when tackling sensitive political or social issues. Her tone was curious but firm, as if she genuinely wanted to understand his process while also challenging him to reflect on the impact of his work. Rainbow, who thrives on quick wit and clever deflection, responded with a joke about how you can't please everyone, especially on the internet, but his smile was tighter than usual. He went on to explain that his parodies are meant to entertain and provoke thought, not to serve as moral lectures, but his words carried an edge of defensiveness. The audience laughed, but the laughter was less enthusiastic, as if they could sense the conversation veering into uncomfortable territory. Clarkson, undeterred, shared her own perspective as a public figure who has faced scrutiny, drawing a parallel between her music and Rainbow's satire. She mentioned how she's learned to navigate criticism by staying true to her values, implying that Rainbow might consider a similar approach. This comment seemed to strike a chord with Rainbow, who leaned back in his chair, his body language suggesting he was bracing himself. He responded by saying that satire, by its nature, is meant to push boundaries, and that softening it to avoid backlash would dilute its purpose. The exchange was still civil, but the warmth from earlier had faded, replaced by a subtle battle of ideals. Clarkson, perhaps sensing the shift, tried to lighten the mood with the joke about her own controversial moments, but Rainbow's response was curt, a rare departure from his usual charm. The audience, now fully aware of the tension, began to murmur, their excitement giving way to curiosity about where this was headed. Behind the scenes, producers likely noticed the shift as well, but the live nature of the show meant there was no pausing to regroup. Clarkson, ever the professional, pushed forward, asking Rainbow about his plans for future projects and whether he'd consider toning down his satire to reach a broader audience. This question seemed to hit a nerve. As Rainbow's expression hardened, he replied that his work is for those who get it, and that trying to appeal to everyone would mean losing the essence of what makes his art unique. The audience clapped, but the applause was scattered, reflecting the divided energy in the room. Clarkson nodded, her smile polite but strained, and tried to pivot to a lighter topic, asking about Rainbow's love for musical theater. But the damage was done. The conversation had taken on a life of its own, and Rainbow's growing discomfort was impossible to ignore. The segment, which had started with such promise, was now a tightrope walk, with both Clarkson and Rainbow struggling to maintain the balance between professionalism and authenticity. The audience, caught between their loyalty to Clarkson's warmth and Rainbow's razor-sharp humor, waited with bated breath for what would come next. The third segment of the interview marked the tipping point, as the simmering tension between Kelly Clarkson and Randy Rainbow boiled over into a moment that would dominate headlines. Clarkson, perhaps unaware of how her questions were landing, continued to probe Rainbow about the responsibility of satirists in a divided world. She referenced a recent online debate where some fans had accused Rainbow of crossing a line with a parody that targeted a polarizing political figure. Her question was framed as an invitation for Rainbow to share his side, but it came across as a challenge, as if she were asking him to justify his creative choices. Rainbow, who had been maintaining a veneer of composure, visibly bristled. He leaned forward, his tone sharp but controlled, and said that satire isn't about making everyone comfortably, it's about holding a mirror up to society, even if the reflection is unflattering. He added that he's never claimed to be a unifier, and that his job is to call out hypocrisy with humor, not to hold hands across the aisle. The audience, sensing the shift, grew quiet, their earlier cheers replaced by an uneasy silence. Clarkson, caught off guard by Rainbow's intensity, tried to diffuse the situation with a laugh, saying, "Well, you sure know how to stir the pot." But her attempt at humor fell flat, and Rainbow's expression remained stern. He countered with a pointed remark about how artists shouldn't have to censor themselves to appease critics, a comment that seemed directed not just at the online detractors but at Clarkson herself. The studio, once filled with laughter and applause, now felt like a pressure cooker, with the audience and crew holding their breath. Clarkson, ever the seasoned host, tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground, asking Rainbow about his upcoming projects and whether he'd consider Broadway show. But Rainbow, now fully in defensive mode, wasn't having it. He interrupted her, saying, "You know, Kelly, I'm not here to debate my art, I'm here to share it." The audience gasped, the bluntness of his words cutting through the room like a knife. Clarkson, visibly taken aback, paused for a moment, her smile faltering. She responded with a measured, "I hear you, Randy. I'm just trying to understand your perspective." But the damage was done. The exchange had crossed into confrontation territory, and there was no going back. Rainbow, perhaps realizing the weight of his words, leaned back and crossed his arms, his body language signaling he was done engaging on this topic. The audience, new fully invested in the drama, began to whisper among themselves, some siding with Clarkson's earnest questioning, others with Rainbow's defense of his artistic freedom. The producers, watching from the sidelines, likely scrambled to figure out how to salvage the segment, but the live format left little room for intervention. Clarkson, determined to keep the show moving, transitioned to a commercial break, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. As the cameras cut away, the audience buzzed with speculation, and social media began to light up with clips of the exchange, with fans and critics alike dissecting every word. The stage was set for the dramatic moment that would define the episode and spark a firestorm of debate. As the show returned from the commercial break, the tension between Kelly Clarkson and Randy Rainbow was impossible to ignore, even as both tried to regain their footing. Clarkson, ever the professional, opened the segment with a warm smile and a light-hearted comment about how things get a little spicy sometimes, attempting to acknowledge the earlier clash without dwelling on it. She pivoted to a fan-favorite segment, inviting Rainbow to join her in a karaoke duet, hoping the music would diffuse the awkwardness and bring back the show's signature feel-good vibe. The audience, eager for a return to normalcy, cheered as the band struck up a classic Broadway tune, a nod to Rainbow's musical roots. But Rainbow, still visibly rattled from the earlier exchange, seemed hesitant. He joined in, his voice strong but lacking its usual playful energy. The duet, which should have been a highlight, felt forced, with Clarkson carrying most of the enthusiasm while Rainbow's performance was subdued. The audience clapped along, but their applause was polite rather than rapturous, as if they too could sense the lingering unease. Clarkson, sensing the disconnect, tried to inject humor, joking about how she's no match for Rainbow's vocal prowess, but her efforts were met with a half-hearted chuckle from Rainbow. As the song ended, Clarkson invited Rainbow to sit back down, hoping to wrap up the interview on a positive note. She asked about his memoir, Playing with Myself, and how it felt to share his personal story with the world. Rainbow, seizing the opportunity to steer the conversation away from politics, opened up about his journey, sharing heartfelt anecdotes about his childhood and the influence of his grandmother. For a moment, it seemed like the interview might recover, with the audience responding warmly to Rainbow's vulnerability. But then, Clarkson made a misstep, circling back to the earlier topic by asking how Rainbow's personal experiences shape his satirical lens. The question, though well-intentioned, reignited the tension. As Rainbow's face tightened, he responded curtly, saying, "I think we've covered that, Kelly. I'd rather talk about the book." The audience, now accustomed to the roller coaster of emotions, let out a collective murmur, sensing that the interview was once again on shaky ground. Clarkson, clearly caught off guard, nodded and apologized, saying, "Fair enough, let's stick to the book." But the damage was done. Rainbow's patience was wearing thin, and the once friendly dynamic had turned frosty. The segment continued with a few more questions about the memoir, but Rainbow's answers were short and clipped, a stark contrast to his usual effervescent charm. The audience, now fully aware of the rift, watched with a mix of fascination and discomfort, their earlier excitement replaced by a sense of unease. Clarkson, determined to end on a high note, thanked Rainbow for his time and promised the audience a surprise performance from him later in the show. But as Rainbow nodded politely and the cameras panned to the cheering crowd, it was clear that the earlier confrontation had left a mark, setting the stage for the dramatic exit that was yet to come. The final segment of Randy Rainbow's appearance on the Kelly Clarkson Show was meant to be a triumphant showcase of his talent, with a planned performance of one of his iconic parodies to close out the episode. The audience, still reeling from the earlier tension, was eager for a moment of levity, hoping Rainbow's signature humor would salvage the awkward interview. Clarkson introduced the performance with her usual enthusiasm, praising Rainbow's ability to make people laugh while tackling tough topics. The stage was set with a colorful backdrop, and the band launched into the familiar opening notes of one of Rainbow's most popular parodies. But as Rainbow took the stage, something was off. His usual flair was muted, his smile strained, and his performance lacked the infectious energy that had made him a YouTube sensation. The audience clapped along, but their enthusiasm was tempered, as if they could sense his heart wasn't in it. Halfway through the song, Rainbow paused, mid-verse, and addressed the audience directly, saying, "You know, I came here to share my work, not to defend it." The crowd fell silent, stunned by the unexpected interruption. Clarkson, standing off to the side, looked visibly confused, her smile faltering as she tried to process what was happening. Rainbow continued, his voice steady but laced with frustration, saying, "I think I've said all I need to say today." With that, he set down the microphone, turned, and walked off the stage, leaving the audience gasping and the crew scrambling. Clarkson, caught completely off guard, rushed to the center of the stage, trying to salvage the moment with a nervous laugh and a quick, "Well, that's live TV, folks." The band played a hasty transition, and the show cut to a commercial break, but the damage was done. Backstage, producers likely scrambled to figure out how to handle the fallout, while social media exploded with clips of the walk-off, with fans and critics alike dissecting the moment. Some praised Rainbow for standing up for his art, arguing that Clarkson's persistent questioning had pushed him too far, while others felt he overreacted, accusing him of being overly sensitive to legitimate questions. The incident sparked a broader debate about the role of satire in today's polarized world, with some defending Rainbow's right to push boundaries and others siding with Clarkson's call for accountability. The audience, still buzzing as they left the studio, shared their own takes, with some feeling cheated out of a full performance and others captivated by the raw drama. Clarkson, ever the professional, returned after the break with a smile, moving on to the next segment without addressing the walk-off directly, but her subdued demeanor suggested the moment had affected her. The incident, though brief, became the defining moment of the episode, overshadowing Rainbow's appearance and sparking a firestorm of conversation that would dominate headlines for days. In the aftermath of Randy Rainbow's dramatic walk-off from the Kelly Clarkson Show, the incident became a cultural flashpoint, igniting debates across social media, news outlets, and late-night talk shows. Fans of Rainbow rallied to his defense, arguing that Clarkson's line of questioning had been unfairly confrontational, putting him in a position where he felt forced to justify his entire career. They pointed to his history of using satire to call out hypocrisy and bring levity to serious issues, insisting that his work shouldn't be subjected to the kind of scrutiny Clarkson had applied. On platforms like X, hashtags like #TeamRandy and #SatireMatters trended, with users sharing clips of his parodies and praising his boldness for walking off rather than compromising his artistic vision. Meanwhile, Clarkson's supporters argued that she was simply doing her job as a host, asking thoughtful questions to spark meaningful conversation. They pointed out that her questions were rooted in a genuine curiosity about the challenges of satire in a divided world, and that Rainbow's reaction was disproportionate, especially given the platform she'd given him. Commentators on shows like The View and Late Night with Seth Meyers weighed in, with some framing the incident as a clash between two well-meaning artists with different approaches to public discourse. The media frenzy only grew as both Clarkson and Rainbow remained silent in the immediate aftermath, with neither issuing a public statement right away. Sources close to the show, speaking anonymously to outlets like People, suggested that Clarkson was devastated by the incident, feeling that her questions had been misinterpreted as an attack. Others claimed Rainbow felt blindsided by the focus on controversy rather than his creative achievements. The incident also sparked a broader conversation about the role of talk shows in navigating sensitive topics, with some critics arguing that the format often forces complex issues into oversimplified sound bites. As the dust settled, clips of the confrontation and walk-off racked up millions of views on YouTube, with comment sections becoming battlegrounds for fans of both stars. The Kelly Clarkson Show continued its season, with Clarkson addressing the incident only indirectly, emphasizing her commitment to fostering open dialogue. Rainbow, meanwhile, returned to his YouTube channel with a new parody that subtly referenced the ordeal, proving his resilience and commitment to his craft. The incident, while a moment of conflict, ultimately highlighted the power of both Clarkson's authenticity and Rainbow's unapologetic satire, leaving fans eager to see how each would move forward. For now, The walk-off remains a defining moment in talk show history, a testament to the unpredictable magic of live television and the passionate personalities that make it unforgettable.